Hi, my name is Curt Karns. I'm the executive presbyter from the Presbytery of Yukon in Alaska, and I'm with the Yukon Presbyterians for Earth Care group that organized the climate change conference that took place in Alaska last month in September of 2014. And I just want to give you a little bit of information. We're so glad that Nan was there. There were people from Maryland, there were people from all over the country that were there, and we were really blessed to see and to learn from a whole variety of people. The reason that we held the conference in the first place was because it had become very clear to us how urgent the climate change issue is for the whole world. And it became so urgent to us because in some ways Alaska is like the canary in the gold mine. We're seeing signs of things happening in such a large way that we need the rest of the world to hear how important it is. And so we began trying to reflect what would be a way of trying to inspire the rest of the church to see how important this is. Our idea was, what if we connected Christian faith that demands that we care for God's creation with the science, get the scientists from the University of Alaska who are studying these issues to talk about the urgency from a scientific point of view, and connect that then with some of the Native American elders who live in Alaska who can speak from a traditional wisdom point of view that there are ways of living better on the planet that we can learn. And they're closer to that learning than we are, and they can inspire us in our response to the climate change issue. So that's what we did. And we gathered in Anchorage, and we met with professors from the University of Alaska Anchorage and from the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. And so we met with Dr. Kazi, who is a biologist working around glaciers. We met with Dr. Michael Castellini, who is an oceanographer and fisheries expert dealing with what's happening to animals and the oceans. We met with Professor Larry Johnson, who's a retired ecologist from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who could show us what's happening with permafrost and all of the effects that that's beginning to have on the environment around the interior of Alaska. And as we waded into these issues, we began asking, what can we do to respond better to the urgency of this situation? We came up with several interesting ideas. We ended with a World Cafe conversation, which just lets everybody talk with each other. And we move around and sit with different groups so that we hear what one group says, that we can bring that to the next group and inspire one another. There were a few interesting things that came out of it. One of them was that for some people, moving into a new way of living is kind of scary. And so it's natural for people to hold back. And so what we realize is we need to find the ones who are out in front. We need to find the prophets who understand how God is leading us today. But we recognize that prophets are never acceptable in their own country. When the prophet speaks, people say, ooh, that's a little too scary. So a second group we need to find, the early adapters, the ones who can take God's message and then bring it to the mainstream in a way that it starts becoming acceptable. Who are the prophets? And then who are the early adapters? Secondly, we needed people to start seeing the signs of climate change in their own areas. People spoke about the extreme storms. People spoke about droughts. We began understanding there are signs of climate change everywhere. They're just maybe a little more subtle than what we saw from the vanishing ice and the changing oceans in Alaska. And so we began asking people to take a look at their own regions. What are the signs in their regions? And who are the prophets in your region? Who are the early adapters that can successfully help the church to respond as a demonstration of how we can live in this environment? Third thing we came up with was an understanding that there really are people who are experimenting with some awesome ways of living. So we went and visited people who were doing things with permaculture, with urban homesteading, and began looking at all these different experiments that are underway. And that again sends back to the home churches. What's happening in your area? How are people experimenting with better ways to live? What kind of smart technology allows us to live better on this planet? But the deepest thing of all was an understanding that we really need to be developing disciples of Jesus Christ, who are people who follow in the way that Jesus is leading. People with Jesus eyes, who see the way that the Christ is already at work right now, telling us to take meaningful action today and right now. So that's what we're challenging everyone to do. Now, we do hope that people will go on their own action learning excursions. We figured out that experiential learning is a whole lot better than a lecture. When you experience something and then reflect on what you're learning, that's what motivates us to change. So we challenge you, go out and take a look. Experience what God is doing in the area around you. climate change is singing to us. If you take a look at Job chapter 7, verses 12 and 13, it says this: "Listen to the birds of the air, they will speak to you. Listen to the animals, they will talk. Listen to the wind of the waves and the sea. Listen to what the fish will say. They will instruct you in the way that you will go." It's time for us to listen. God is speaking to us. The way forward is clear. It's been a great joy to host this climate change conference, but we're hoping it will have effects way beyond Alaska. God bless you.